My parents sold my college fund to pay for my sister's luxury weddings, so I moved out silently. And what I did next shocked them completely. I'm a 19-year-old guy, and for as long as I can remember, my family has treated me like the background character in my own life. I don't mean that dramatically. I mean it in the quiet, everyday ways that slowly convince you your existence is more of an obligation than a presence. I've spent my teenage years working part-time jobs at grocery stores, stocking shelves, delivering packages, whatever I could find. Every dollar I saved felt like a lifeline toward college, toward escape, toward a life where I could finally make decisions without being guilty. And honestly, that college fund my grandparents left me was the only thing that made me feel like my future was actually possible. Meanwhile, Ava, my older sister, lived like the world was built for her comfort. She never worked a day in her life, but somehow she was always rewarded. She's talented, my mom would say. She's destined for more, my dad would add. And every time she threw a tantrum, they'd swoop in like she was some fragile princess needing rescue. I can still hear my mother's voice. Give it to her, honey. Ava deserves nice things. I gave up clothes, shoes, gadgets, weekends, and even peace just to avoid the constant emotional pressure. It wasn't even worth fighting anymore. They'd twist it until I looked ungrateful anyway. So I kept my head down, did the chores, did the errands, paid my phone bill, and focused on what I thought would be my escape college. The one place where I imagined I wouldn't feel like someone's shadow, but lately, something has felt off in the house. Whispered conversations behind closed doors. My parents lowering their voices when I walked by. Ava smiling too much whenever they talked to her. I assumed all of it was just about her upcoming dream wedding, something they'd been obsessing over for months. Still, a part of me felt a chill I couldn't explain, like I was about to overhear something I wasn't meant to. This is where things really started spiraling. Even if I didn't notice it at first, the wedding became the only language spoken in our house. Like every conversation, every breath, revolved around Ava's once-in-a-lifetime fairy tale moment. I'd come home from work and find the living room buried under fabric samples, color charts, and brochures for venues that looked like they belonged to celebrities, not a middle-class family barely holding things together. My mom would gush about imported flowers and custom calligraphy invitations, while my dad bragged about how no expense will be spared. It was bizarre hearing him say that, considering how often he reminded me to be grateful for what you have. One evening, as I walked in with grocery bags, I heard Ava complaining loudly from the kitchen. "This dress looks cheap. I told you, I want the couture one." My mom sighed, "Sweetheart, we're trying. It's just expensive." Ava snapped back, "Then figure it out." I'm not walking down the aisle looking basic. I stood there in the doorway unnoticed, feeling that familiar mix of irritation and resignation. That was always the pattern, Ava demanded. My parents scrambled. And somehow I ended up paying the price in one way or another. I tried to keep my distance from all of it, convincing myself that if I just focused on working and saving, I'd soon be out of this suffocating environment. But the whispers kept happening. Long meetings at the dining table, stressful murmurs as they flipped through envelopes and receipts. My dad pacing the hallway with a calculator in hand. Once, I walked in on them mid-conversation, and they went completely silent until I left the room. My mom even forced a stiff smile, like she was trying to hide something behind her teeth. I brushed it off, telling myself the wedding madness was probably draining them. But the deeper that strange tension grew, the more a knot formed in my stomach, like all this wedding talk wasn't just noise. It was building towards something that involved me, something I wasn't going to like. The moment everything cracked open started out so normal, it almost feels cruel in hindsight. I went to the bank after school to get a simple account statement for a scholarship application, something I'd done a dozen times before. I remember the air in the bank feeling cold, the kind that makes you rub your arms even though you're wearing sleeves. The teller smiled politely, typed in my account number, and then her expression shifted in this subtle, uncomfortable way that made my heartbeat thicken. She cleared her throat and said, "Are you sure this is the right account?" I leaned forward. "Yeah. Why?" She turned the screen slightly. "It shows a balance of $42. 42, not 42,000, not even 400, just $42. I felt my stomach drop so fast it made me dizzy. "There's supposed to be over 38,000 in there," I said, the words stumbling out like I wasn't fully awake. She gave me this sympathetic look I'll never forget. There were large withdrawals over the last 3 weeks, same signature each time. My hands were shaking, not metaphorically, actually shaking against the counter. My grandparents saved that money their entire lives. My grandfather used to say, "Education is your escape, son. Don't let anyone take that from you." He probably never imagined the threat would come from inside the house. I stepped outside, and the sunlight felt too bright, like the world was mocking me for being stupid enough to trust my own family. I called my mom immediately. She answered cheerfully, "Hey, honey, we're in the middle of wedding planning. Why is my college fund empty?" I cut in, voice breaking despite my best effort. She sighed like I'd asked something inconvenient. "Oh, that. We needed it for Ava's wedding. You'll understand one day. Understand." I stood there on the sidewalk, frozen, listening to people laughing and cars driving by. Life moving on while mine stopped cold. That was the moment I realized I wasn't a son to them. I was a resource, and resources can be used up. When I got home that evening, the air felt heavier than usual, like the walls themselves were waiting for the confrontation they knew was coming. I walked straight into the living room where my parents and Ava were surrounded by wedding catalogs, laughing like they hadn't just detonated my entire future. My voice came out tighter than I expected. "Why did you take my college fund?" The room went quiet, but not from guilt, more like irritation. The way people react when a noise interrupts their show. My mom looked up first. "Sweetheart, lower your voice. We used it for the wedding. Ava's wedding is important for this family." I stared at her. It was my money. Grandpa left it for me. My dad scoffed, waving his hand dismissively. "You re-smart. You'll find scholarships. You don't need all that." Ava rolled her eyes and said, "Seriously? You're being dramatic. It's just money. Just money. Just money that represented years of my grandparents' love. Just money that represented the only future I had control over." I felt this burning in my chest, the kind that makes it hard to breathe. I looked at Ava, and she didn't even have the decency to look ashamed. She was scrolling through her phone, smirking. "Besides," she added, "college isn't for everyone. Maybe it's better this way." Her words hit harder than anything my parents said. It was like she wasn't just stealing my money, she was trying to steal my identity. The version of me my grandparents believed in. "I needed that," I whispered. That was my way out. My mom frowned, annoyed. "Stop overreacting. You're part of this family. Sometimes we all have to sacrifice." I stared at them, all three of them, and it finally clicked. They weren't sorry. They weren't confused. They weren't conflicted. They genuinely believed they were entitled to everything I had. I walked to my room in silence, each step feeling heavier than the last, and for the first time in my life, I realized I didn't belong in that house. I sat on my bed for a long time, staring at the wall like it could somehow explain why the people who were supposed to protect me had no problem destroying my future. My room felt smaller than ever, suffocating even, like every memory in it was mocking me for staying as long as I did. I kept hearing my mom's voice in my head. Sometimes we all have to sacrifice, except that we never included Ava. It only ever included me. After hours of sitting in that numb, buzzing silence, something inside me finally snapped into place, not in anger, but in clarity. I got up, opened my closet, and pulled out a single duffel bag. I wasn't packing for a dramatic escape. I wasn't slamming doors or yelling or announcing anything. I was doing the one thing they never expected from the quiet, obedient son. I was leaving, asterisk. I folded my clothes with this eerie calmness, like my body knew what to do, even while my brain felt miles away. The house was unusually quiet, no arguing, no wedding talk, just muffled footsteps and distant clinks from the kitchen. I could hear Ava laughing with someone on the phone, bragging about some bridal spa appointment. That sound only made me pack faster. When I walked into the hallway, my dad glanced at me. "Where are you going with that bag?" he asked, not out of concern, more like annoyance. "Out," I said, tightening my grip on the strap. "For how long?" My mom chimed in from the dining room. "I'll let you know," I replied, voice steady in a way that surprised even me. Ava didn't even look up. "Don't forget to clean the garage tomorrow," she muttered. I didn't answer. Instead, I walked back into my room, placed a folded note on my pillow, just one sentence. Thank you for teaching me what not to become. I slipped out of the house quietly, the same way I'd lived there my whole life, unnoticed. I wasn't coming back, and none of them had any idea what losing me would set in motion next. Moving out sounded liberating in my head, but reality hit fast and hit hard. The room I found was tiny, barely big enough for a bed, a cracked desk, and a window that rattled whenever a bus drove past. The walls smelled faintly of dust and old carpet, and the radiator hissed like it was annoyed I existed. But for the first time in my life, the silence around me wasn't hostile. It was mine, and that alone felt like a kind of freedom I'd never known. Still, the days that followed were brutal. I worked long shifts at the grocery store, then rushed to late classes, constantly fighting exhaustion that settled deep in my bones. Every night I collapsed onto the thin mattress, sore and starving, wondering if I'd made a mistake. I'd hear my roommate typing away on his computer, smell cheap noodles cooking in the kitchen, and think, this is my life now. No safety net, no backup. The fear would creep in like a cold draft under the door. One night, my roommate knocked quietly. "You good, man?" I nodded, even though my eyes were burning. "Yeah, just tired." He shrugged. "It gets easier eventually." I didn't know if he meant it, or if he just didn't know what else to say. But the simple acknowledgement meant more than anything I ever heard at home. Despite everything, I kept pushing. I filled out scholarship forms between shifts. I asked professors about campus jobs. I stayed late in libraries writing essays under flickering fluorescent lights. Slowly, emails started rolling in. First, a small grant, then a work-study offer, then a partial tuition scholarship. Each acceptance felt like lighter chains falling off me, proof that I wasn't as powerless as my family made me believe. One evening, as I walked back to my room through the chilly night air, the city lights glowing off wet pavement, I realized something, for the first time. My future wasn't tied to someone else's expectations, but I had no idea that while I was finally climbing up, my family's perfect world was about to collapse. I didn't plan on keeping tabs on my family, but news has a way of finding you when your relatives love drama more than honesty. One afternoon, during a short break at work, my phone buzzed with a message from my cousin Maya. "Have you seen what happened with Ava's wedding venue?" I frowned, wiping sweat off my forehead from unloading boxes, and texted back, "No." Within seconds, she sent a link to a local event page, and the headline slapped me across the face. "Luxury venue cancels wedding after payment dispute." At first, I thought it was some glitch, but then the pictures loaded. Ava crying in a parking lot, mascara streaking down her face, my dad arguing with the venue staff, my mom clutching a folder of papers like she was trying to hold her entire world together. Even through the blurry screenshots, I could see the panic in their eyes, the same eyes that looked so smug when they told me to sacrifice for family. Maya called me immediately. "Your parents are freaking out," she said breathlessly. They owed the venue thousands. They couldn't finish the payment. "So," I replied quietly. She hesitated. "They were counting on something. I don't know." But when everything fell through, the venue canceled. I didn't say anything. I just stood there in the back room of the store, surrounded by cardboard boxes and the faint smell of detergent, staring at images of the mess they created with the money meant for my future. Later that night, I heard that Ava went on a meltdown, screaming about how no one respects her vision and how the universe was against her. She even told people, "I abandoned the family when they needed me most," which would have been hilarious if it wasn't so pathetic. As I lay on my thin mattress, my phone glowing in the dark, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Not joy, not revenge, but vindication. For the first time, their world was falling apart without me holding it up, and the cracks were only beginning to show. The fallout from the venue disaster must have hit harder than anyone expected, because suddenly my phone, the same one they never bothered calling unless they needed something, wouldn't stop ringing. Missed calls from Mom, missed calls from Dad. Even Ava, who hadn't spoken a single kind sentence to me in years, left a voicemail. I didn't listen at first. I just watched the notifications pile up like little reminders that they only remembered I existed when their world started crumbling. But curiosity eventually got the better of me. The first voicemail was my mom's voice, shaky and overly sweet. "Sweetheart, we need to talk. The wedding situation got complicated. Please call us back. We're family. Family." That word tasted bitter coming from her. The next one was my dad. "Son, you shouldn't have left like that. We could have worked things out. Anyway, call me back. It's important." Important. Yeah, I bet it was. Then came Ava's message. "Look, I don't know what your problem is, but you need to grow up. The wedding is literally falling apart, and you're making everything harder by ghosting us. If you have any decency left, you'll help fix this." I actually laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it confirmed exactly what I'd always been to them. The safety net they took for granted. Days passed, and their messages grew more desperate. My mom said, "We can't afford the venue's late fees. Please, we need you." My dad said, "Don't make us beg." Ava texted, "You're jealous." Admit it, not once did any of them say sorry. Not once did they mention the college fund they stole. Not once did they acknowledge the damage they caused. They weren't reaching out because they cared. They were reaching out because they needed someone to rebuild the mess they created, just like always. But I didn't respond. Silence became my loudest boundary, and it terrified them far more than yellings ever could. And while they panicked, something far darker and far more revealing was waiting for me just around the corner, a week after the flood of desperate messages. I got a letter in the mail from a law firm addressed to me. At first, I thought it was some scholarship paperwork, or maybe a mistake. But when I opened it and saw my grandparents' names at the top, my chest tightened. The letter explained that their attorney wanted to meet regarding important matters concerning your educational trust. I didn't know whether to feel hopeful or terrified, but something in me needed answers, more than I needed sleep, money, or even revenge. The attorney's office was quiet, lined with oak shelves and old books that smelled like dust and time. He was an older man with a calm voice, the kind that made everything he said feel heavier. "Thank you for coming," he began. "I know things at home have not been easy for you." My throat tightened. "What is this about? The trust?" He nodded slowly. "I need to tell you something your grandparents left behind, something they feared you might one day need." Then he dropped the truth that hollowed me out. The college fund wasn't just money. It was a protected trust, legally bound to be used only for my education. Meaning, my parents didn't just betray me emotionally. They committed actual, documented financial fraud. "They were aware of your parents' favoritism toward your sister," he continued gently. "Your grandparents created the trust to ensure you had a future independent of that." My breath stuttered. "They knew?" He nodded with sad eyes. "They suspected your parents might try to redirect resources to your sister, so they made this legally airtight to protect you." Hearing that felt like someone pressed a hand directly on an old bruise I didn't even know was still tender. All the years I thought I was just imagining things. All the times I convinced myself I was overreacting. All the moments I felt invisible, unwanted, overshadowed. My grandparents saw it. They saw it before I ever could. By the time I walked out of the office, my hands were trembling. The cold air outside felt sharp against my skin. That letter, that truth, cracked something wide open inside me. This wasn't just betrayal anymore. This was my entire childhood suddenly making horrifying, painful sense, and it left me with a decision I never imagined I'd have to make. Guy didn't walk into that attorney's office looking for revenge. Honestly, when I left, all I wanted was a place to sit down and breathe. My legs felt weak, my head buzzing like a hive had been shaken awake inside it. I sat on a cold bench outside the building, watching cars pass, wondering how the people inside them lived lives untouched by betrayal like mine. But the attorney's final words kept replaying in my head, echoing with a weight I wasn't prepared for. Asterisk. "You have the legal right to reclaim everything that was taken from you, plus damages. And if necessary, the trust violation can freeze any event paid for with those funds." At first, the idea terrified me. I didn't want to become the villain in their twisted family narrative. I didn't want to drag lawyers into my private pain. But then I remembered Ava laughing while scrolling on her phone as they dismissed my entire future. I remembered my mom's voice saying, "You'll understand one day," like I was a burden, not a son. I remembered my dad's casual shrug, "You'll figure it out," like $38,000 was pocket change. Something inside me hardened. The attorney slid a folder across his desk earlier. "If you choose to file," he had said, "do it before the wedding date. It will halt any expenditure related to misused funds. I didn't even open the folder until I got back to my tiny room. The papers felt heavy, legally, emotionally, historically. Every signature line was another step away from the boy they controlled and closer to the man they feared. My roommate walked in as I was staring at the documents. "You okay?" he asked quietly. I nodded. "Yeah, I think I'm finally about to be." That night, under the dim desk lamp, I filled out every form. My hands shook, but not from fear, from the realization that I finally had power. Real, tangible power. Power backed by law, by truth, by people who believed in me long before I ever believed in myself. I didn't tell my parents. I didn't warn Ava. I just filed everything silently, the same way I used to clean their messes, except this time, I wasn't cleaning anything. I was letting the consequences fall exactly where they belonged, and they were about to hit harder than they ever imagined. The explosion didn't happen with shouting or slammed doors. It started with a single notification, an email from the attorney confirming that the trust violation claim had been officially processed and forwarded to every entity connected to the misused funds. I reread the message twice, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. The next line hit like a quiet thunderclap. The venue will be required to freeze all activity related to the event until the investigation is resolved. A calm washed over me, the kind that comes only after you've been drowning for years. 2 days later, my phone blew up, not with guilt or apologies, but with chaos. The first call was from my mom, hysterical. "What did you do?" she screamed, her voice cracking. "The venue just escorted us out." In front of everyone, I held the phone away from my ear. "I filed a claim for the money that was stolen from me." "You're ruining your sister's life," she wailed. "No," I said calmly. "You did that the moment you spent money that wasn't yours." I hung up before she could twist the narrative, before she could make me the villain in a story I didn't write. Then came my dad. "What the hell is wrong with you?" he barked. "You couldn't just let this go." I felt my jaw clench. Let go of $38,000, my future, my grandparents' trust. No, not anymore. His silence lasted just long enough for me to know the truth burned him more than my words. But Ava, her call came last, dripping with rage. "You selfish idiot," she shouted. "Do you know how embarrassing this is? My wedding is ruined because of you." I let out a slow breath. My life was ruined because of you. This is just balance. Her voice cracked into something ugly and panicked, but I didn't stay to listen. I ended the call with a quiet click, feeling something inside me finally settle, like a bone that had been out of place for years, finally snapped back where it belonged. That night, my cousin sent me photos, my parents being escorted out by staff, Ava screaming in her designer robe, guests whispering, relatives recording everything for the family group chat. For once, I wasn't the one humiliated. For once, I wasn't the scapegoat, but the real closure, the final shift, was still waiting for me on the other side of all this. In the weeks after the wedding imploded, the silence from my family was almost eerie. Expectant silence I grew up with, but a hollow one. Like the sound you hear after a door slams shut for the last time. I didn't miss them. I didn't miss the constant demands, the guilt, the twisted definitions of sacrifice. Instead, I focused on the one thing they never wanted me to prioritize, myself. My tiny room still smelled like old carpet. My bed still creaked every time I sat down, but somehow it felt more like a home than the house I lived in for 19 years. College became my sanctuary. Late-night study sessions with cheap coffee, cold walks across campus with my hands buried in my pockets. Libraries buzzing with whispers and turning pages. For once, I wasn't fighting for space. I belonged somewhere, and every small victory felt like reclaiming a piece of the boy they tried to break. One afternoon, as I was finishing a tutoring shift, my professor approached me. "You ever thought about applying for the leadership scholarship?" he asked. I shook my head. "I didn't think I'd qualify," he smiled. "You've survived more than most. That counts." Those words sank deeper than he knew. I applied. 2 weeks later, I was awarded a full tuition scholarship, something I never would have reached if my parents hadn't shown me how much they were willing to take from me. The irony wasn't lost on me. My cousin later told me Ava's wedding never recovered. The venue wouldn't reinstate her date. Vendors pulled out. Relatives whispered about karma and poor parenting. My parents tried spinning a dozen different stories, but the truth spread faster than their excuses. People finally saw what I spent years trying to hide. One evening, standing outside my building in the cool night air, I realized I felt free. Truly, finally free. Not just from them, but from the version of myself, who kept trying to earn love from people who never intended to give it. I didn't destroy them. I didn't seek to. I simply protected the future my grandparents entrusted to me, and choosing myself, after a lifetime of being the family sacrifice, was the most powerful revenge I never knew I needed. I walked inside, closed the door behind me, and for the first time, felt certain this is the life I was meant to build. This is the peace they could never take from me.